Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dynamics of the Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to Professor James Moriarty, Napoleon of Crime, and arch nemesis of Sherlock Holmes. For once, I didn't say that super fast. Because I am so tired. Just actually a normal thing for this podcast, so who even knows at this point? I'm Madeline Quinones, and I am joined by my lovely and giggly at this moment co-host.
Dixie Pockets.
And I am so excited. This is an episode that I've been looking forward to basically since we started this show. Because finally, you are mostly going to hear Dixie this time. And it's going to be brilliant because I'm just going to let her do her thing. And it's going to be awesome. But before we get into what we've got going on, we've got some news first. If you are a Moriarty fan, you probably already know this by now, but the Audible audio drama Moriarty, The Devil's Game is coming back with a second season. Yay! Only the second season has a different name. So now we're like the Granada series here. It is, I believe it's Moriarty and the Secret Order? Silent Order. Sorry, I keep wanting to get that mixed up. It's Moriarty and the Silent Order. And joining the cast this time is none other than Dame Helen Mirren as Lady Milverton. Okay, sorry, but that deserved a big squeak. That deserved the biggest squeak. That is so exciting. I saw on Twitter after the news broke, Elliot Blake was going yeah, I directed Helen Mirren. What's up with that? I'm like, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. I'm so happy for them that they not only got a second season, but they're getting such a big name for it as well.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So, Phil Lamar is returning as Sherlock Holmes. So, spoiler alert, Holmes survived, which is not that big a jump since Moriarty survived, and there wasn't a body. So, they definitely left that door open. Although there was a body for Gregson, and yet Curtis Armstrong is coming back too. So I don't know what's going on with that, but you know what? I am glad to have Curtis back.
Yeah.
So how can you argue with that, really?
Maybe he's Gregson's twin brother.
It's never twins, Watson. It's gonna be fun. So that is going to premiere on November 9th. So next month, and we're very, very excited. I am vibrating right now. I can't wait. And hopefully we are going to get Charles Kittinger and Elliot back on the show. Because really, we got to talk about this with them.
Yeah.
We got to. This was actually recorded this year, and they were able to do that because Audible did not fall under the kind of contracted work that SAG-AFTRA was striking against. So that's good. And also, it sounds like negotiations. I mean, by the time this actually airs, maybe something has been negotiated. I don't know. Fingers crossed. The Writers Guild made some big wins, so that's exciting. So fingers crossed for the actors. This is really important.
Yeah.
And definitely wish all the best to everybody that we personally have talked with on the show, including Daniel Davis. I keep thinking since we talked with him. Yeah. So there's that. And okay, so running from early this month, October 2023 to October 29th, I believe, is the final date. Meadowbrook Theater in Rochester, Michigan, which is the Detroit area, is putting on a production. It's only the second ever production of Ken Ludwig's Moriarty, a new Sherlock Holmes adventure. And I'm really excited about that. Meadowbrook Theater has finally been posting stuff on their Facebook about it. So you can check out their Facebook. I am also starting to share stuff to our Facebook page, Dynamics of Podcasts on Facebook. So it's really exciting. It's really interesting to see what's going on. And I saw a photo of the Holmes in the production. I'm blanking on the name of the actor, but what was really funny was like I looked at that photo and I was like, oh, wait a second, I know exactly which moment in the play that is. And this isn't going to mean anything to the audience, but Dixie, it was
Yeah.
2 o'clock precisely. I was so I was like, so I am actually going to be going to see that play on the second to last day of the production with a bunch of other Sherlockians, including some of the members of one of the Detroit groups, the Ribston Pippins. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be fun, and I'm really curious to see like what's going to be the same and what's going to
Yeah.
be different.
Just make sure you laugh at the Peter Blau joke, and no one
Oh,
else will
of
have any
course.
idea why.
Well, there will be several Sherlockians there with me, so I think
Yeah.
we will all laugh at the
Yeah.
Peter Blau joke, and nobody else is going to know why, and it's going to be great. I'm excited about that. And also, I am hoping maybe we can sneak in a little bonus episode for this show. I'd really like to do a quick little interview on the ground with the cast afterwards, so we'll see if that works out. In any case, I expect that probably that episode of the Watsonian Weekly is gonna have reactions to the show. So make sure that you are following the Watsonian Weekly, and make sure that you're following it anyway because it's fun. Brad Kefauver does a good job. All right, so there's that, and then there is Sherlock Mondays, which is a really neat. It's a YouTube series that is being hosted by the Rosenbach Museum and Library. Yeah, Rosenbach Museum and Library, which is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Rosenbach actually has at least one Conan Doyle manuscript. I believe that they have the empty house, so that's very relevant to our interests. But yeah, they have done several like basically live video book clubs kind of over the past few years. They've done Austen Mondays, Jane Austen, which a friend told me about at the time and I never looked into it until like just now. But I missed it while it was going, but at least now I can binge watch it, so that's fun. They've also done Dracula, and they get some big names for some of these programs. Mark Gatiss was on
Oh,
at
nice.
least one of these Dracula episodes. Yeah. So I should actually be listening to that instead of the Austen ones right now since it's October. But you know what? I'll get through Austen and then go straight to Dracula. So there's that, and then they've done some others, but those are the two main ones in the recent past that I know about. But now they are doing Sherlock Mondays, and they are they're going through the stories in order of publication, starting with The Study in Scarlet, and they will be ending next spring with the empty house. After that, they will be doing, and these are free and on YouTube, and we'll have links in the show notes. In May, they will be doing a series that you have to pay for, which I'm fine with doing, for The Hound of the Baskervilles. So I don't want to miss that. But the co-hosts are Dr. Anastasia Klimchinskaya. I believe I pronounced her name correctly. Curtis Armstrong, Monica Schmidt. Les Klinger actually appeared on the first episode about Sign of the Four, which is the one that I just saw. And Marielle Caro is the fourth co-host who is gonna be coming up on the second episode of Sign of the Four. And I say that, but by the time you listen to this, that episode will have already aired. But you can watch these live on YouTube, and you can participate in the live chat. And it's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying these. So if you want to, just hear Sherlockians talk about Sherlock Holmes stories, and especially, some people who just like really know what they're talking about, that's the fun thing. It's a lot of fun. Curtis's first episode, it wasn't a live recording. I hope that the next one is, because I just want to be like, hi, Curtis.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first Sign of the Four episode also had Monica Schmidt, because of course she was talking about Holmes and the cocaine issue. She impressed the heck out of everybody by reciting the opening passages of the story from memory.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
she was like, I've just got that whole first bit memorized. It's my favorite part. And I'm just like, dang, girl. That was a boss move, and I love it. So, Sherlock Mondays, definitely catch up on YouTube and catch the new ones if you are able to. If your time zone allows, because I know unfortunately it doesn't for Dixie. It's 7 Eastern on Monday evenings, so that does not work out for South Africa.
Yeah, no, it would not.
Unfortunately, but you can watch the episodes on YouTube.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. And I think that's all the news that we've got. So, Dixie, what are we talking about today?
So, for those of you who don't know, in November, it's going to be the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, which first aired November 23rd, 1963. So, today's episode is going to be about Moriarty and Doctor Who.
With a particular emphasis on a certain character.
Yeah. So, Doctor Who and Sherlock Holmes have kind of overlapped a lot over the years. I suppose they're what you call like friendly fandoms. We've had references to Sherlock Holmes fairly frequently in Doctor Who. You've got whole stories like the Talons of Wing Chiang that are kind of references to it. There've been a lot of shared actors like Peter Cushing, and of course we had a shared showrunner between BBC Sherlock and Doctor Who. So yeah, there's been a lot of crossover. And Sherlock Holmes himself has even appeared in the Doctor Who universe. So, but so has Arthur Conan Doyle. So that makes it kind of interesting. But then, Doctor Who canon is more accommodating of that, the sort of wibbly wobbly continuity.
Canon is more of a suggestion.
Yeah. And because of the stories that we're going to be talking about, and particularly with a certain character, it's going to be impossible not to get into spoiler territory here. It's just the nature of it. So if you haven't seen up to the newest episode and you're trying to avoid spoilers, unfortunately, this might not be the episode for you. I'm going to be talking about both the series and the expanded universe, so there'll just be a lot of spoilers. So sorry.
And there's one other disclaimer that we need to make, I think, before we hop into this about opinions.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot of opinions about the Master. I don't think that's a secret. And I will definitely get into some of them, but at the same time, I mean, it's just my opinion. I'm happy for other people to disagree. It's not a big issue. So I'll try and be nice.
Well, I think, yeah, I will also be voicing some opinions, and we both feel very strongly about what we think. But I think that at the same time, it's important for us to note that kind of like we think that all Holmes is good Holmes, like all Doctor Who ultimately is good Doctor Who because every era is for somebody the best. Every doctor is somebody's favorite doctor.
Yeah, I don't think there are any bad doctors. I mean, there's some that I like more than others, but at the end of the day, they're all important to people, and there've never been any that I disliked. I mean, I even you can't see at the moment I'm wearing some Doctor Who badges, which I won't say which two they are, but it happens to have my two least favorite classic Who doctors, but I still like them. I mean, I'm wearing badges of them, so yeah, they're all good.
Yeah, so just a reminder, we will try to be respectful.
Yeah.
Because I think that both of us know the frustration of like having things that we love just be dumped on, and that's not fun.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to be like that for anyone else.
Yeah. All right, so Dixie, do you just want to hop into it?
Yeah. Okay, so I think an obvious place to start would be the novel All-Consuming Fire by Andy Lane. It was published in 1994 as part of the New Adventures range, which those books followed the Seventh Doctor and his companions after the show was cancelled in 1989. So they were like a continuation of Doctor Who, basically, because at the time they didn't think there would ever be any more live action Doctor Who. So I've read that entire range of novels, and I mean it's definitely a mixed bag. But I do also think if you're a fan of the show, they're worth checking out because it was a very important like experimental stage in the show's history, and a lot of the ideas that were first introduced there ended up being brought in when the series was brought back. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And this particular book is quite well known. I'm sure Sherlockian Doctor Who fans have probably heard of it because it's literally just a crossover with Sherlock Holmes. And the author Andy Lane, he later went on to write the Young Sherlock Holmes series. Yeah, so I mean, the book is full of Sherlockian references. There's even Sherringford Holmes in it. And Moriarty himself is not a major character in the story. In fact, he's removed entirely from the Big Finish audio adaptation of the book.
Yeah. Which I understand because he's pure fan service.
Yeah, he's not actually really relevant to the plot. So if you're trying to streamline it for an audio adaptation, it makes sense to cut him. But I think it's nice that in the book he shows up because if you're playing in that world, you want to bring Moriarty in.
Yeah.
I can see why they couldn't resist putting him in there. He ends up kind of on the same side as the heroes, which is funny because they're fighting a common enemy. Watson even saves his life. And Moriarty, in return, he provides them with some calculations they need. I can't remember exactly what it was for, but anyway, he actually helps them out. So that's his one big contribution, which in the audio version, I believe the Seventh Doctor does it. So that's how they wrote around that. But yeah, it's nice that we get a couple of scenes with him. One moment that stands out to me is Watson is trying very hard to psychoanalyze him and to understand him. His theory is that Moriarty has Tourette syndrome to explain the way he's constantly moving his head. I'm not sure I buy that, but I guess that's an interesting take.
I think that's one that you see floating around in scholarship sometimes.
Yeah, so that's like the big Sherlock Holmes crossover. But then so Virgin Books, who did the new adventures, after a certain point they lost the license to continue publishing Doctor Who books, because by that point the 1996 movie had come out. So the BBC
Mm.
decided they wanted to do a book range with the Eighth Doctor. So Virgin Books wanted to continue publishing books, so they just stopped incorporating the Doctor into it and focused on the Doctor's companion, Bernice Summerfield, who was introduced in that book range.
Oh, so that's how that worked.
Yeah, because basically the rights to use her belong to her creator, Paul Cornell, rather than the BBC. So they could get away with doing things with her as long as they don't reference anything that belongs to the BBC. Although what's funny is that in one of the books, it literally just mentions Daleks and Ogrons and other things from the show, because the writer Terrance Dicks, who's written many stories for Doctor Who, I don't think he actually knew that he wasn't allowed to include that. So he just goes ahead and references a bunch of stuff.
Well, so was it really a legal arrangement that they couldn't even reference things?
As far as I know, they weren't allowed to reference anything from Doctor Who because they were
'Cause-
no longer technically they were no longer supposed to be writing Doctor Who stories. So they could only
Right,
reference,
right.
yeah. They sometimes they referenced the Doctor, but they couldn't use like the Doctor's name at all or
Hmm.
anything. They had to be sort of careful about it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I should also mention, just because I think it's kind of fun, that book range introduces the Doctor's brother, Irving Braxiatel, who he's in some ways kind of Moriarty-like. Although he's not. It's hard to say whether he's evil or just he's very morally ambiguous. But
So kind
he's
of
a fun
like
character.
BBC Mycroft.
Yes, yeah, he's a lot like him in some ways. He comes in there, and in the novel Ghost Devices, I forget the author of that one now, but in that particular book, there's a schoolboy named Maury who has an uncle Seb Oran, and and the book strongly implies that he's a distant descendant of James Moriarty. I don't know how that works, but apparently he hasn't inherited his mathematical genius, and he tries to vaporize his math tutor because he's really frustrated with maths. But he does run like a criminal empire, and he's very dramatic and kind of murder happy. So there's this fun line where his long suffering uncle is like, if your your great 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 grandfather hadn't had the most crucial confrontation of his career at the edge of a whacking great melodramatic waterfall, we'd be running the galaxy by now. But it's kind of weird because the rest of the book has absolutely nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes. So I don't know why they threw in that little reference, but I guess they were a fan and couldn't resist.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were Moriartians.
Yeah. And then while we're talking about semi-licensed parts of the Doctor Who universe, there's another book which I haven't read called Erasing Sherlock, which it's
Mm.
part of so there's a whole range of stories called Faction Paradox, which I'm not even going to try to begin to explain what that is because it's kind of complicated. I never got into it, but they're a group that were introduced in the Eighth Doctor novels. If you want to get a basic introduction to them, they first appeared in the novel Alien Bodies by Lawrence Miles, which that book is pretty good. So so this book is set. It's not a licensed part of the Doctor Who universe, but it's connected to Doctor Who. And Moriarty, in that, I believe he's like a 21st century tech genius who invents a time machine. I don't know the details of the story because I've never read it, but that's something you can check out. And Faction Paradox is also it's only loosely connected to Doctor Who, so it has a whole lot of fans who aren't even Doctor Who fans. It's kind of weird. So even if you're not into Doctor Who, that might be something you would enjoy. For me, I just never got into it, unfortunately. And there's also a reference to Moriarty in the 2012 Christmas special, The Snowmen, since we might as well get back into the TV show. The Doctor is also dressed as Sherlock Holmes in the scene.
Shut up, I'm making deductions.
Yes. And so he likens the episode's villain, the Great Intelligence, to Moriarty. And I think Richard E. Grant, who ends up playing the Great Intelligence later on. I think he wouldn't make a bad Moriarty himself. He's kind of
Yeah,
got the right look for it.
he really does.
And he's very creepy in the episode.
Oh, he's very good at doing creepy. He was Stapleton in a 2002 Hannah the Baskervilles movie by the BBC, and that was a weird movie, and his Stapleton was like really evil.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
Mm-hmm.
That episode also implies that Sherlock Holmes is based on Madame Vastra. So just complicating things even more in how Sherlock Holmes fits into Doctor Who.
Yep. Wait, before we like get away from the novels entirely, there is one other that does include Holmes and Watson in it.
Yeah, you talking about happy endings?
That's the one.
Yeah. Oh, that one's fun. So that one is like it's the 50th one in the Virgin New Adventures range. So it's got a bunch of references to previous books. So that's why Sherlock Holmes and Watson show up in it, because it's referencing obviously all-consuming fire. And they're really fun in that. What's that line that Sherlock Holmes has?
He's locked himself up for like a day or so, like with the internet, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And then he emerges from his hole and he goes, Watson, I've become with it.
Yeah.
And that's just so adorable.
Yeah. Oh, I love that line. That one also, it also features the Master, but I don't know if they interact at all. There's like a red herring in that story. Sorry, this is spoilers again.
Yeah.
But where there's a character who you think is going to turn out to be the Master, and Holmes is investigating him, but it turns out he's entirely innocent. So I don't know if the Master and Sherlock Holmes actually interact in that story, but they are in the same story.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff in that one, so it might be a bit difficult to follow if you haven't read the previous books, because it's got elements from all of them. But yeah, Holmes and Watson are fun in that, and I also I love the relationship between Watson and Bernice Summerfield. They're really cute.
They're super cute. Yeah, Watson is just like, she's so cool.
Yeah, so then moving on from like the books, there's in Doctor Who magazine, there's a comic that features Moriarty, but as a fictional character. So it takes place in a place called the Land of Fiction, which was introduced in a second Doctor serial called The Mind Robber, it's a really good serial. You should check it out. But the Land of Fiction is basically, it's like, I don't know, like another plane of reality where fictional concepts can come to life. And in this comic, which is called Character Assassin, the Doctor's arch enemy, the Master, who we're going to be getting into a bit more later on, so don't worry, he enters the Land of Fiction and tracks down the secret society of famous fictional villains, and he asks to join. They refuse, so he fights through all of them to get to their leader, who turns out to be Professor Moriarty. And in this, Moriarty has figured out that he's a fictional character. And so kind of like Moriarty in Next Generation, he realizes that he's fictional, but he's able to take control over the world that he's in. Yeah, so he's ruling all these other fictional characters. But then the Master, he easily defeats him, and he accuses him of being merely a plot device your creator used to eliminate that detective fellow. And as I recall, you couldn't even manage to do that. And then he dumps the poor professor back over the Reichenbach Falls.
Oh.
So this comic was part of an issue that was celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Master's introduction to Doctor Who. It was written by Scott Gray, who he said he thought Moriarty was, quote, a rubbish villain, and he resented the way the Master is often compared to him. And he specifically wrote the story because, quote, I wanted to see the Master kick Moriarty's ass. Which, I mean, I like both of them. I don't see why you have to put them against each other. And again, no offense, but so Scott Gray has written some other comics in Doctor Who magazine that featured the Master, and I really didn't like his take on the character. So yeah, I guess he and I just aren't going to see eye to eye. I mean, he doesn't like the fact that the two were compared, but the fact of the matter is that the Master specifically owes his creation to Moriarty. So this is the part where I get to tell you all about the Master.
And this is the part where I should qualify this with, I mean, you are probably actually one of the leading fan experts on the Master just because you have consumed just about every bit of Master material that's
Yeah.
out there. So
There was a point where I'd consumed almost all of it. I'm a little bit behind now because
uh-huh.
Big Finish have been putting out a lot of audios, but
Oh
one day
yeah.
I will catch up with it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is where your qualifications come from. You
Yeah.
are actually uniquely qualified, I think, to talk about this. So, yeah. So, how did the Master get his start?
Okay, so in 1970, John Pertwee took over the role of the Doctor, and I should just say I'm a very big Third Doctor fan. I mean,
Yes.
that's where I started watching the show, so he's just always been my Doctor, and I think he's a really great Doctor. And I also think if you want to get into classic Who, he's probably a good starting place just because that's when the show stopped having missing episodes. It's when they switched to color, and it's when a lot of elements that are now like just standard parts of the show were introduced. I mean, I love the first Doctor and I love the second Doctor, so they're not bad starting points either. But I think the third Doctor is just an easier place to get into the show. But yeah, so his era switched up quite a few things from the previous two Doctors. As I said, the show moved to color, and the setting also switched to Earth. I mean, part of that I think was for budget reasons, but in universe, it's because in the second Doctor's last serial, The War Games, he had been put on trial by the Time Lords and exiled to Earth. So he ends up working for an organization called UNIT, and led by Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, who, if you're a New Who fan, will know is as the father of Kate Stewart. And interestingly, suddenly all these alien invasions start happening on Earth. So after the Doctor's first season, the showrunners Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks were looking to they wanted to make a few changes to kick off the next season because they wanted something that would really grab people's attention. Because you usually get a lot of new viewers every time there's a new Doctor, but then they kind of trail off a little bit. So they wanted something to start the new season with a bang. So they introduced a new companion, Jo Grant, who I also love. She's my favorite companion. And they also brought in another unit officer, Mike Yates. And they're big. Well, they wanted a big gimmick to really get people interested. So they started to think, the dynamic between the Doctor and the Brigadier it's kind of like Holmes and Watson. So if you have Holmes and Watson, why don't you have a Moriarty? And up until that point, there hadn't really been, I would say, like many recurring villainous characters. I mean, you'd obviously had recurring monsters like the Daleks and the Cybermen, but you didn't have someone like Davros yet. He would only appear later on with the Fourth Doctor. I mean, I think the closest there was like in the First Doctor era, there's a character, another Time Lord called the Monk, who he's really fun. His first serial, The Time Meddler, is great. I'd really recommend it. But he was a bit more of a comedic character than a serious threat, and he only appears in 2 stories. So I can't think offhand of a proper recurring villain that they'd had. So yeah, so they decided that they wanted a Moriarty, and Barry Letts immediately knew who he wanted to cast because he'd been an actor before and he'd worked with Roger Delgado. I can't remember what the show was, but Roger Delgado, who is the first Master, he played, I think, a Nazi who was interrogating Barry Letts' character. So that's how they knew each other. He knew he could play a villain. And Terrance Dicks, meanwhile, he came up with the name, the Master, because he thought it sounds kind of sinister and egotistical, but it's also an academic title like Doctor, so they match each other well. And yeah, they decided the character would be another renegade Time Lord, because again, they're looking for someone who's like an equal and opposite of the Doctor, because they're basing him on Moriarty, who's basically that for Sherlock Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
So the character first appeared in the serial Terror of the Autons, which that was actually the second episode of Doctor Who that I saw, and that's the one that got me hooked on the show. It's actually the scene where the Master, he kills a guy with a couch, which if you're picturing how that works, that's not how it works. He suffocates him with it. It's very funny. And I don't know, when I watched that, I that's what got me hooked on the show. So that story was a great success. It's funny that apparently it was considered so scary at the time that there was even talk in Parliament about if TV was getting too violent because
Oh
of that
my
episode.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so the Master then went on to appear in every single story that season. And I mean, I don't mind, but that starts to become a little bit repetitive, and it's a little bit obvious because they always play it like it's a big twist that the villain of the story is the Master, but he's the villain in every story that season. So that doesn't quite work over the long term. So in the next two seasons, they dial back his appearances a lot. So yeah, let me talk about Roger Delgado, because he's one of, if not my favorite actor of all time. He's just really, really good in the role. To me, he's still the definitive version of the character. I mean, I love many of the others, but you just can't beat him. And he and John Pertwee have such great chemistry too. They'd been, I don't know how well they knew each other, but they did know each other before then. Roger Delgado's wife was friends with John Pertwee. I don't think they'd ever worked together before, but they knew each other, and they just had a really great dynamic in the show. And Roger never overplays the role. He wasn't chewing the scenery or everything. He comes across as he's very polite and amiable. He seems like a nice guy. But because of what he does, he manages to be threatening even while he's being charming and funny. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's just, I think that kind of villain is always going to be more appealing than someone who's just ranting and going over the top. I mean, that can be fun, but that's a more cartoonish take on it, I think. And I don't think Roger ever strayed into that sort of territory. He gives a very measured performance. You get the sense that he's someone this person is someone who is very in control of themselves, and who thinks that what he's doing is totally right. He's not trying to be a pantomime villain.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah. So Roger had actually played a whole lot of villains before this, so he was pretty experienced. In fact, he did. Even in the 60s, he was interviewed on a BBC children's show called Junior Points of View, specifically to give advice on how to play villains. So this was before he'd even played the Master. He already created such a reputation for himself as a character, as an actor who played villains. I think he enjoyed it when he got to play characters who weren't evil, because it doesn't happen often. I've watched a lot of his filmography, and I should just give a warning, a lot of it is kind of racist, because he was of Spanish and French descent. I think he may even have been of Turkish descent on his father's side. I'm not sure, but
that makes sense based on his appearance.
Yeah, so that's the thing. He was born in England, but he did not look English.
Right.
He looked foreign. So that meant that they just cast him as the foreign bad guy in a whole lot of his roles, which that could be anything from Spanish to Indian to even Chinese. Like at the time, if you look foreign, you were just, you played foreign characters regardless of whether it made sense or not. So yeah.
At least in Robin Hood, he played a foreign good guy.
Yeah. I think one of his most well-known roles before the Master, he had a recurring villainous role on the series Sir Francis Drake, I think it was called, where he plays a Spanish ambassador who's always butting heads with Francis Drake. And there's even a reference to this in an episode, I think it's Colony in Space in Doctor Who, where the Brigadier says, oh, they've just gotten word from one of their agents that the Master has been spotted. And then the end of the episode, he comes back and he says to the Doctor, no, it turned out to just be the Spanish ambassador.
Oh my gosh. That's funny.
Yeah, he also he played a Middle Eastern character alongside Jeremy Brett in an episode of the 1960s shows The Champions. And at that, he's actually not a villain. One of his rare heroic roles. And he also appeared briefly in the Peter Cushing Sherlock Holmes series. He in their version of The Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax, I think.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he shows up briefly at the beginning and he talks to Watson.
Oh, that's funny.
He had a whole lot of small roles throughout, like from the 50s to the 70s. He never led a series as far as I know, but he was like a reliable character actor.
Right.
So you would see him showing up in guest roles. Sometimes there's different characters in the same show in different episodes. But yeah, normally as the foreigner, because that's just at the time, if you looked foreign, I guess that's what you were typecast as. Yeah, if you want to know more about him, I mean, you guys aren't going to be able to see this, but there's this recent biography of him called I Am Usually Referred to as the Master by Marcus K. Holmes. And it's really good. So I'd recommend checking that out. Yeah, so he'd been trying to get into Doctor Who for a while. I mean, a lot of actors at the time wanted a role in Doctor Who. And most British actors at some point or another have ended up in Doctor Who. Yeah, so I think at least twice before he tried to get into the show, but for whatever reason, he hadn't been cast. So he hadn't expected to get such a big role when they contacted him and asked him to play the Master. So he was really happy to have gotten into the show, and he seems to have really enjoyed playing the Master. He and the cast got along very well. They all seem to have been really close. They used to have dinner at each other's houses. Yeah, and there's an interview, I believe it's from just after they'd finished filming his first season, where he talks about the role. And he says, I enjoyed this chap who was really more than just a Moriarty to the Doctor. And I could tell from fan letters that I was the man they loved to hate. There were even one or two kids who complained that I wasn't wicked enough. In the serial The Daemons, which is the last serial of his first season, it's filmed in a real English village. And I think a lot of the extras were just like the real villagers there. So at the end, the Master is taken into custody by a unit. And so the villagers are all supposed to boo him as he's being driven away. But apparently there's this famous story when the director told them to do that. They were like, boo him, we'd rather cheer him.
Aww. Well, we talked about this the other day. He is super charming.
Yeah,
he's
really
incredibly charismatic and very, very charming. So
yeah,
that sense.
I mean, I think you can't help but like him, and you can't help but have a good time when he's on screen. He's just so much fun.
Well, I don't know because I have not watched all. I need to watch more of the Third Doctor, especially. Yeah, sidebar, I'm more on the new Doctor Who side of things because that's the kind of pacing that I can handle.
Yeah.
But I've seen gift sets with this where they're like in some kind of cell together, the Doctor, Jo, and the Master.
Oh, yeah, that's in Frontier in Space.
Okay, and the Master goes, my strength is the strength of 10 men because my heart is pure.
Yeah.
Just like, it's pure what, darling?
I just love the dynamic that he has with the Doctor and Jo, especially as you see it progress throughout their stories, where like in the beginning, it's a bit more antagonistic. And I mean, like, Jo is afraid of him because the first time they meet, he hypnotizes her and so on. But by the end, it's just kind of fun. In that story, Frontier in Space, which is Roger Delgado's last serial, he tries to hypnotize Jo at one point. By this point, she's learned to resist it. And so she's just like, oh, well, better luck next time, that kind of thing. She's just very dismissive of him by that point.
Well, it's like, of course, this was on your Tumblr. Then I saw this gift set of like Jo yelling at the Master, and I'm just like, except for Clara and Missy decades later, does that ever actually happen again? That there's a companion that is really able to stand it to the Master like that? It's like aside from Martha has a moment, but I can't
Yeah,
think of anybody else.
yeah. And Martha never has like that slightly more playful relationship.
Right, right.
With her,
Yeah,
it's definitely it's all antagonistic, which I mean
right.
is very fair considering
Yeah,
what he did
totally
to her
fair.
family. Yeah,
Yeah, but there's just that early dynamic between the three of them is just delightful, and
yeah,
I think that there's maybe a little of that back with like 12 and Missy and Bill,
yeah,
but it's not the same because they're not innocent anymore. You
yeah,
know, the doctor and the master,
yeah,
there's too much between them for them to
yeah,
have that same weird
yeah.
camaraderie again.
Yeah, yeah. So Frontier in Space was Roger Delgado's last serial, although it wasn't meant to be. So
Mm-hmm.
after a few years on the show, unfortunately, despite the fact that he wasn't one of the regulars, he found he wasn't getting cast in other roles because all the casting agents apparently assumed that he was too busy with Doctor Who. And so the thing was, actors don't actually make a lot of money, and they
Right.
need money to survive.
Yeah.
So he wasn't making enough. So he told the producers that he unfortunately would probably have to leave the show so he could actually get other work. So they offered him the choice of either they can just not use him anymore and quietly drop the character, or he could go out with a bang. And so he was like, no, I definitely want to go out with a bang. So there were some early ideas thrown around, which were basically about a story that would end with the master dying, but it would be implied that he dies sacrificing himself to save the doctor. Like at the last minute, he has a change of heart and decides that he's not going to let the doctor die. And so that's how he goes. He's saving the doctor. And as much as it would have hurt, I really wish we could have seen that. I mean, we do get something similar with, I guess, both with Johnson's mastering the end of time and also with Missy later on. But I love what they do with Missy, but I
Mm-hmm.
think like specifically seeing that with Roger Delgado and John Pertwee would have been so good.
Mm-hmm.
It would have broken my heart, but it would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, before that could happen, so Roger had been filming a French TV show in Turkey, and it was just like a small role, I believe. And he'd finished filming it. It does actually exist, though I've never watched it. But I think you can find an episode of it online. It's in French, I believe. And I don't know, on the way to or on the way back from the set of that, he was killed in a car accident because I think the driver was going to fast around a bend or something and the car went over the side, and so he
Mm-hmm.
and everyone else in the vehicle were killed. And this happened long before I was born, but it still makes me so sad to this day
Yeah,
because
it's really sad.
yeah, it's just it's so unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like
Mm, it's a tragic way to go.
yeah, and everyone on the show on Doctor Who was devastated as well. Katie Manning, who played Jo, she actually only found out about it because I think she saw like a news headline as she was driving, like on a newsstand or something, saying like Doctor Who
Oh,
actor dies. And so she didn't even know who it was. She just knew that one of her co-stars had died.
yeah.
And yeah, and John Pertwee, he was also devastated, and that was a factor in why he later left the show. And I think it was for Katie Manning as well. Like it just wasn't the same for them without Roger there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's the sad thing about being a Roger Delgado fan is
Yeah.
that you don't get to see him like you do with a lot of the other classic Who actors, where they got involved with things like Big Finish, and
Mm-hmm.
they've continued to be a part of the fandom. He
Mm-hmm.
never got that, and it's
Yeah.
really sad.
It's like being a Jeremy Brett fan a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. We both picked really tragic people to be our favorite,
I know. Oh,
but
golly.
they're both amazing actors.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And they even work together,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
if
You
it's
can if
kind
you
of
look online.
questionable.
Yeah, if you look online, I believe you can find pictures of the two of them together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so after his death, the character of the Master was kind of left to rest for a while, which makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't want to immediately recast them or anything.
Yeah.
But in 1977, in Tom Baker's third season, in the serial The Deadly Assassin, that was actually written by Robert Holmes, who also wrote the Master's introduction in Terror of the Autons. So in that one, they finally bring the character back, and now he's played by Peter Pratt. So Peter Pratt was a singer as well as an actor. He seems to have done a lot of musical roles, and they specifically cast him because of his voice. So in the serial, he's under heavy makeup because now the character is basically a walking corpse because he's run out of regenerations, and so he looks like a walking skeleton. So they needed someone who had a powerful voice, and he's fine as the Master. I don't have any complaints, but he only has the one story, so it's hard to kind of judge him in the role. But The Deadly Assassin is a very important serial in the show's history because it's our first big look at Gallifrey. Like the first time we see Gallifrey is in the War Games. I just mentioned it earlier, and now I was blanking on it. And then we see it again in the Three Doctors, but this is the first time they actually spend a whole story there, and we actually get to see more of Time Lord society. So this is the one that introduces a whole lot of the lore that ends up becoming like just part of the fabric of the show. At the time, their fans were up in arms about this because they didn't want to know all of this stuff about Gallifrey, that you're taking all the mystery out of the character. And there's still people to this day who don't like that story because of the stuff that it introduced about Time Lord society. I personally love it. I think the thing is, the previous stories, the Time Lords, you could sort of see them as like this benevolent, all-powerful race, and then this one pulls back the curtain and shows that they're kind of just a bunch of fussy old bureaucrats, which to me, I find that more interesting. But some people prefer the previous portrayal of them.
Well,
but for me, I just think it just opens up more possibilities that way.
And also I think it makes sense as to why the Doctor would want to get out of Gallifrey in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So then at the end of Tom Baker's run, in the story The Keeper of Traken, this version of the Master appears again, but I don't know what the reason was, but they recast him, and he's now played by Jeffrey Beavers, who was also cast for his voice because he'd done a lot of radio work, and he has quite a distinctive voice, which has served him well because he's done a lot of work in the Big Finish audio dramas since then.
Can we talk very briefly about Jago and Lightfoot?
Yes, I was wanting you to bring them up.
Oh, Jake and Lightfoot. So these characters originally appeared in Talons of Weng-Chiang, which is a hugely problematic serial. And unfortunately, which is super unfortunate because it also has good things about it, like the Doctor dressing up as Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And Leela being awesome.
Yeah, that one's also written by Robert Holmes, who did The Deadly Assassin and Terror of the Autons. But yeah, there is a lot of racism in it.
Yeah.
But Jago and Lightfoot are so good.
Jago and Lightfoot are so good. I've heard them described as being like, because then they go on to front their own show in Big Finish, but they're not Holmes and Watson. They're both Watson.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, Lightfoot is like serious Watson, and Jago's like kind of silly Watson, but they're both very charming and endearing, and R.I.P. Trevor Baxter.
Yeah. But that's such a great series. I think Sherlockians should definitely check it out because
absolutely there's so many Easter eggs, and then there's the story that has Doyle in it.
Yeah.
Then there's what's actually more of an Agatha Christie style murder mystery, which is not actually kind to Sherlockians. But the head of their society is known as Moriarty, which I think is a very interesting choice. But interestingly, the whole series actually exists because of Andy Lane, because he wrote The Mahogany Murderers, which was part of their Companion Chronicles run
Yeah.
that focused on different companions in Doctor Who, and they did one based on Jago and Lightfoot. So the whole show is Jago and Lightfoot filling each other in on the parts of the adventure that each other missed, and it's really funny.
I
And
still haven't listened to that one, actually. I need to get around
what?
to. I don't know why I never got, because I started with the first
My
episode of their actual range.
Uh-huh.
And I kept meaning to go back to that one, and then I just never got around to it.
Oh,
One
you've
of these
got to.
days I will.
It's so interesting because it also kind of makes it clear that they're still acquaintances. They're not good friends yet. But also it also introduces Ellie,
Oh, yeah.
voiced by
I
Lisa
love Ellie.
Bowerman. Yeah, me too. I was such an Ellie stan. She's my girl. And yeah, the show on the whole, Jago and Lightfoot is the episodes can be very hit and miss, I
Yeah.
think. I think that's fair. But I mean, Trevor Baxter and Christopher Benjamin and Lisa Bowerman were always great.
Yeah.
It's a series that has a lot of heart to it.
Yeah. And I think it's those characters are why you listen to it. It's not so much about all their adventures. It's just because they're so much fun.
They are so much fun. And of course, because it's Big Finish and it's audio, they get we won't spoil how this happens, but they get Colin Baker as the Sixth Doctor showing up, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good stuff to that show, and I never actually listened to the final season where it was like individual, where it was more like a audiobooks, because it was like individual character. You haven't listened to that either, I think.
No, I haven't listened to that.
Yeah.
I think after Trevor Baxter died, it was just hard to listen to anymore.
It was hard.
Well.
Yeah. I listened to the special that they did where they were able to use enough clips of him so that Lightfoot could show up a little bit, and that was really lovely to hear him one last time. But yeah, oh my gosh, I'm crying. It is hard.
Yeah, I think that was the last one I listened to, because after that it was just too hard to listen to without him.
But they did have what was it? Was it their 13th or 14th season? Whichever was, they had a last season because they did have the story written and then he passed.
Yeah.
Kind of they shot themselves a bit in the foot because almost every season ended on a cliffhanger. So they just kept going and going, and it was the season. I forget which season number it was, but it was the season that focused on Ellie. That was the first one that didn't end on a cliffhanger. So they could have closed it there, and it would have also made a lot of sense to the story.
Yeah, I think that would have been a great place for it to end. But I mean, obviously they didn't know that Trevor Baxter would pass. So yeah. But the Master does show up in that.
Yes, he has a whole season.
Yeah, so that's Jeffrey Beavers again playing. We call him Crispy Master in the fandom because he's, well, crispy. But yeah, he's done a lot of Big Finish audios, and he's really good. He's a great actor, and he plays the role in a very creepy way. He's also done a few other roles in Big Finish, not as the Master. I think it's one of in their Gallifrey range. He plays a vampire in that, I think.
And it's also worth noting that he was in the BBC radio Sherlock Holmes series with Clive Merrison.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you knew that. I told you about it.
Okay, I forgot it, which happens.
He is in The Devil's Foot. He plays the vicar.
Oh, yes, you did tell me.
And then the funny thing is that Dr. Leon Sterndale is voiced by none other than Patrick Allen, who was Colonel Moran in Granada. And he is terrific because Patrick Allen was one, and we talked about this before, I think, in our Moran episodes, but Patrick Allen was like one of the original big British voice actors. At least I've been given to understand that.
Yeah.
And I can see why. He was really good at it. He was great at doing like these intense and emotional characters. And so Leon Sterndale fit perfectly into his repertoire. So
Oh,
I
I
just
forgot.
think that's really fun.
Yeah, I forgot about it, but mentioning Patrick Allen reminded me. Jeffrey Beavers was also in a TV movie, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, which it had a lot of actors in it. So that starred Derek Jacobi as Hamlet, who we will talk about Derek Jacobi later on. Patrick Stewart was also in that, but
Yeah.
Eric Porter and Patrick Allen were both in that.
Yeah. Well, and so was Lala Ward, right?
Yes, yeah, she played Ophelia.
Yeah. And then I think Eric Porter is her father, and then
Yes, yeah.
Patrick Allen is the ghost.
Hamlet's
He's
father.
Hamlet's
Yeah.
father.
Um,
So that's just a big collection of Sherlock
yeah.
and Whovian actors in there.
Yeah. Yeah, so getting back to the show, Jeffrey Beavers, in his role in Keeper of Traken, oh, I should also mention he was the husband of Carolyn John, who played the Third Doctor's first companion, Liz Shaw. And his first
Oh,
appearance in Doctor Who is actually in the Third Doctor's first season. He has a brief cameo as a unit officer, which
oh,
I
that's
think he got
funny.
that part because he was her husband.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the story, the master tries and fails to steal the doctor's body because so he's run out of regenerations and he's trying to keep himself alive. So his goal is now to take over the doctor's body so he'll have a new Time Lord body for himself. And of course, it doesn't work. But in that same story, there is another character called Tremus, which you'll note is an anagram of master, though that doesn't make any sense why it would be in universe. But an anagram will be a big part of the master's character going forward. So that character is played by Anthony Ainley, who he's the son of a famous stage actor, Henry Ainley, and he'd also played quite a few villains up until that point. That he'd been in a series called, what was it, the Palisters, something like that. He'd played an evil vicar in, which John Nathan Turner, the producer, had seen him in, and he really liked him in the role. So that's why he cast him in this, because that character Tremus, who he's a good guy. He's the father of the Fifth Doctor's companion Nyssa. So this is Nyssa's first story as well, and he helps the Doctor along the way. But at the end of the story, after the Doctor has left and they think they've defeated the Master and so on, the Master comes back and he steals Tremus's body, and so that's how we get the new Master, played by Anthony Ainley. Yeah, and Anthony Ainley they make him up to look a bit like Roger Delgado because I mean he's given a fake beard, he's got like this black costume, but he's definitely his own unique version of the character. And a lot of people at the time didn't like him as much as Roger Delgado. And I mean, I can understand because I mean, even for me, Roger is still the best, but I really like Anthony Ainley. He's a lot of fun. I mean, he's definitely a more pantomime version of the character in most of his stories, but he's just a lot of fun.
Well, he seems like he's always having a lot of fun.
Yes, I think that's what makes him so enjoyable, is that he always looks like he's having fun. And in his next story, which is Logopolis, which is the Fourth Doctor's lost story, he actually succeeds in killing off the Doctor, which even the Daleks, I don't think, have the Daleks ever done that? I mean, they killed the 10th Doctor, but he came back.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely the first time any of the Doctor Who's major villains have been the one to kill off the Doctor, because even in the first Doctor's last serial, which is the introduction of the Cybermen aren't the one who kill him. He just kind of dies of old age, basically. So yeah, the Fourth Doctor falls off a radio telescope, and then we get Peter Davison as the next Doctor. And I think one of the reason I've read a lot of interviews from the time when the 80s Doctor Who was airing, and one of the things a lot of people didn't like about Anthony Ainley's Master is that as they saw it, he didn't have the fun relationship with the Doctor that Roger Delgado had with the Third Doctor. And I mean, you can kind of see that it's definitely a more antagonistic relationship than it was before. But I think that also makes sense in universe for both characters, because, I mean, by this point, I think the Doctor is kind of getting fed up with the Master's antics. He's clearly going around and murdering a lot of people. Like, that's maybe not someone you want as your friend.
Well, so wasn't the master like responsible for like a lot of deaths in
Yeah,
Logopolis?
yes, because he's trying to hold the universe to ransom, basically. And so because there's a group of people who've basically been keeping the universe from falling apart due to entropy. And so he's threatening to undo all of their work and basically have the whole universe collapse if people don't, I don't know, make him their ruler. I don't know what he wants, but obviously it ends up backfiring and he realizes he can't actually control what he's doing, and so the universe is just falling apart around him. And so he has to work with the Doctor to try and fix things because he realizes he messed up. And so, yeah, Nissa's planet Traken, which is where Tremas is from, ends up being erased.
Oh, jeez.
I think it's ambiguous how many planets are destroyed, but you see like whole star systems going dark. So
Oh
he,
my
he
gosh.
definitely has a very large body count in that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, he kills the Doctor, so yeah, you can see why they wouldn't necessarily be as friendly anymore. And I
Right.
think on the Master side, I always feel like there's a big divide between before and after the Master ran out of regenerations. I feel like that changed him a lot. I think with Roger Delgado, he doesn't understand as much that there's going to be consequences to what he's doing. He's just happily siding with whatever all-powerful evil force he can get his hands on, and he doesn't realize, oh, they're all going to betray him at the end, and that he might actually die if things go wrong. And so, he's just having fun. And
So
I
he
think
is possibly a very young Time Lord at that point.
this is a point of debate. I have a very strong opinion about this.
I know you do.
So there's a story which I don't like, called Legacy of the Daleks. It's one of the Eighth Doctor novels, written by John Peel, who, again, I don't want to be mean, but I haven't liked a single story he's written. In the story, Roger Delgado's master meets the Eighth Doctor, and Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter, is also there. The master ends up killing her husband, which I also don't like. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
sad because
Mm-hmm.
poor Susan has a hard time in the expanded universe. I mean, in the Eighth Doctor audios, she has a son who ends up dying.
Mm.
I wish they would be nice to her, but anyway.
Yeah.
So at the end of the story, she shoots the master, and so he's run out of regenerations at this point. So he tries and fails to regenerate, and he ends up as Crispy Master. So this would, of course, mean that Roger Delgado was the 13th incarnation of the Master. But I disagree with that strongly because
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the impression at all in his episodes that he is a Time Lord on his last life. That just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me with anything that he's doing. I would put him around maybe like third or fourth, like around the same place that the Doctor is.
Yeah. Well, I think you only have to like look at the Doctor in the New Who stories to like see what it looks like to be an older Time Lord.
Yeah.
And the original Master just has none of that. I mean,
Yeah, I just don't think he would be taking the kind of risks he does in the way he does
mm-hmm,
if he didn't have other regenerations to fall back on.
mm-hmm.
I think at that point he's still convinced he's pretty much invincible. And I mean he continues to kind of think that later on, but by that point I think he kind of knows he's not, but he's still clinging to that. At this point
Mm-hmm.
he's like fully convinced that, well, sooner or later things are all going to work out, and it doesn't matter if there are a few upsets along the way. At that point, I don't think it occurs to him that he could actually get killed doing any of this. So I don't think he'd gone through many regenerations at that point. And
Mm-hmm.
Big Finish kind of vindicates me here because the first multi-master story is, I think it was in 2015 or 2016. I feel like it was 2016, that had Jeffrey Beavers and Alex McQueen. Alex McQueen is like an audio only master who Big Finish introduced. He's a lot of fun, and the two of them team up. But it turns out, I can't remember the reasons. It made sense in the context of the story, but Alex McQueen's master goes back in time to before Jeffrey Beaver's master had been fried, basically when he was just a normal guy, and he's the one who ends up crispifying him. I can't remember why, but there is a reason that he does it. And so this, of course, means that he was the Master's last regeneration and not Roger Delgado. So I feel vindicated. I stood by my opinion even before the story, even though I forget where it appears, but I think there's also a comic that implies that Roger Delgado ends up as the fried master. But again, I don't believe that. I'm sticking to my guns on this. But yeah, I think it makes sense why the relationship between the Doctor and the Master is different now in 80s Who than it was in the 70s. And
Yeah.
I do think Anthony Ainley was in fact a good actor. I mean, if you watch his early stories, he's very dramatic and over the top, which is fun, but it's not as threatening as like Roger's more understated friendly villainy. But that was just kind of the way he was directed, I think, to act, because I've seen a lot of his other work, and he is a good actor, and I think he really proves himself in Doctor Who in his performance in his last serial, Survival, which that's actually the last episode of Classic Who. It's in the Seventh Doctor's final season, and by that point, like in the Seventh Doctor era, there's a big shift in the tone of the show. You can see it much more as a bridge between Classic Who and New Who, because by that point, Doctor Who's style had and their pacing was kind of dated even in the 80s. I mean, that was like the late 80s by that point, and TV's tone and everything had shifted a lot. So in the Seventh Doctor era, they finally kind of were doing things in a more modern way, and I think that was reflected in the way that the actors were directed. In that one, he's definitely not having as much fun as he is in the previous ones, but that's because in the story by this point the Master he's more dark and weary. He gives a much quieter performance. You can tell that by this point he's just kind of tired of the way his life has turned out. I don't think there was that much thought actually put into the way his character was written throughout his run, but I find this version of the Master really compelling because of the way, the arc that I have imagined for him in my head, which I admit is mostly headcanon, but he starts out as very flamboyant and he's just having a lot of fun, but I think there's always this like darker undercurrent of almost self-loathing to him, which finally comes to the forefront in Survival, because I mean, the Master has always been very concerned with their image and with being able to perceive themselves as superior to everyone else. And I think on a certain level, Ainley's Master can't quite do that because he's not a Time Lord anymore.
Right.
He's running around in a stolen body. I mean, he's alive, that was his main priority, but I think after a certain point, he's not sure if it's worth it. I get the impression at times that it almost seems like he'd rather just die as long as he can take the Doctor down with him, because this isn't the life that he was hoping to get. And by this point, I think he's realized that he's not as invincible as he thought. I mean, Anthony Ainley's Master was even killed off once in the middle of his run. So in Planet of Fire, which is the second last Fifth Doctor serial, the Doctor lets him burn to death. I mean, you can see in the Doctor's face it's a very difficult choice, but he just I think he also realizes if he saves the Master, he will probably be dooming a lot of people that the Master will kill in the future. And so he makes the choice not to save him. But Anthony Ainley was still in contract to do more stories. So in the next season, he just shows up, and when he's asked, like, how come he didn't die? He says, well, I'm invisible. The whole universe knows that. And that's pretty much all the explanation you get. But yeah, I think he'd repeatedly failed throughout his whole era, and he just starts to realize that things aren't working out, and all he really wants by the point of Survival, especially as at this point he's been infected with something called the cheetah virus. So I mean, he's turning into a cat. There's a whole long story behind that, but anyway, so he's becoming even less. He's losing. Humanity isn't the right word, but
he's becoming animalistic.
Yes, and control is a very important thing for the Master, and he's losing that. Like he's losing everything that he is. So all he wants at this point is to take the Doctor down with him. So yeah, I find something very compelling about his character. But that Survival is not actually his last appearance in the show. It's his last appearance in the show. It's not his last appearance in Doctor Who. So there's this very weird video game from the 90s, from 1997, I believe, called Destiny of the Doctors. And he's like the main villain of that video game. And so they got Anthony to film a bunch of cutscenes for it, which is very fun. I think you can find them all on YouTube, and there he's back to having a lot of fun. I mean, I don't know if you can fit this, how easily you can fit it into his timeline within the show, but it's definitely a very fun thing. The videos, anyway. The game itself is an experience. My brother describes it as a video game made by people who had no idea what a video game or what Doctor Who are.
Oh my gosh.
It's weird. So he did that, and he was also asked to do Big Finish, but I think he wanted more money than they were willing to pay him, so he ended up turning it down. Big Finish has now started doing audios with him, which I haven't, well, not with Anthony Ainley, but with his master, which I haven't listened to because they've recast him, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Understandable.
But yeah, so he was the longest running, he still is actually the longest running master. I mean, he has met in the show and the expanded universe every Doctor up to the 11th Doctor, because so obviously he's in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctor's eras, and he meets the 1st through to the 3rd Doctor in the 5 Doctors, which that I should say is a really fun story. I love that one.
It is, and then the Brigadier ends up punching him out.
Yes, that's so much fun. I think the Brigadier had probably been waiting for that moment a long time.
Oh yeah, that was a long time coming.
Yeah, so yeah, he meets those ones in the show, and then there's, for the 50th anniversary, there was a comic by IDW called Prisoners of Time, I think, that has all the Doctors up till that point showing up. Well, except for the War Doctor, because no one else knew there was going to be a War Doctor at that point. But yeah, he's definitely met the most Doctors of any Master. And I think that's the only time the 9th Doctor has ever met the Master. And they don't interact in that comic. It's just at the end, all the Doctors team up to defeat the Master. So yeah, there's that. Now, after Doctor Who was cancelled, there was an attempt to bring it back in 1996, which it was originally going to be a series, an American series. And I think in the original concept for that, the Doctor and the Master were going to be revealed to be brothers, which that was an idea that had been floated around for years at that point. I mean, John Pertwee has said that in his mind, like the way he played it, he always assumed the Master was his brother. And then in the 80s, it was floated around, and in Planet of Fire, there's actually a line when the Master is begging the Doctor to save him. It was originally going to be, "Won't you show mercy on your own brother?" But then at the last minute, they decided no, they didn't want to pin that down as canon. So
that would also be really dark. It's already dark enough, but that makes it even worse.
Yeah, so he gets cut off just before he can say brother, so it's left ambiguous. So he just says, like, "Won't you show mercy on your own?" And so he could be saying your own kind. I don't know. He could be anything. So yeah, so that was an idea for the American series. There were a lot of weird ideas. Like the original idea for that series, it would have been, I think, a straight up reboot of the show, because it wouldn't have made sense as a continuation. But anyway, it went through a whole long process of development and eventually ended up as a TV movie with Paul McGann, obviously, as the 8th Doctor. And they had a whole ton of ideas of who they wanted to play the Master. They wanted to get like a fairly big name for the role. So like pretty much every actor who was known at the time in the 90s was considered at some point for it. Like I think even Jeff Goldblum was considered.
Oh my gosh.
Christopher Lloyd, just everyone.
Oh man.
Eventually they ended up with Eric Roberts. There's also a brief appearance by a Canadian actor, Gordon Tupple, at the beginning of the movie, who plays the Master when he gets executed by the Daleks. You don't actually see his face, although he was originally going to do the opening narration of the movie, which Paul McGann ends up doing. And I think you can find, he did record that, and I think you can find it on the internet, because I remember hearing it, and it's really weird hearing the Master with a Canadian accent. But yeah, so in the movie, the Master is once again trying to steal the Doctor's body, because by this point he's lost his previous body, and so he gets executed by the Daleks, and now he's in the form of a weird snake thing, which they do not explain at all in the movie. Some of the books have later explained how that all worked, But the movie is very weird as an attempt to bring new fans into Doctor Who because it doesn't explain what Doctor Who is at all.
No.
And brings in some new things like, oh, the Doctor is suddenly half human. And what really, the thing that sent fans absolutely crazy at the time was now the Doctor suddenly is kissing people. That just enraged fandom. Yeah, so while trying to steal the Doctor's body, he possesses a human ambulance driver who's played by Eric Roberts. Eric Roberts' performance is definitely interesting. I wouldn't say it's my ideal portrayal of the character, but it is, if you take the movie for what it is, it's very fun. Like, I think that kind of sums up the movie as a whole. Like, it's not the direction I would have wanted the franchise to go in the long term, but looking back on it now, you can enjoy it a lot. And his performance is definitely, there's a reason it's spawned a lot of memes, because it's really goofy and fun. And Eric Roberts has actually returned to the role in Big Finish now.
Oh.
I've only listened to a couple of audios he's done. He's got a few box sets just about him, and he's been in a couple of other audios. His performance is different now, which I think makes sense, because I always imagine that the reason he is the way he is in the movie is that it's similar to like a post-regeneration weirdness like you get with the Doctor in their first stories. So it makes sense that he would be a bit more serious once he was more established. So if you want more from him, you can listen to some of those. So this is where we need to take a break, because once you get me talking about the Master, apparently there's no stopping me. But in part 2, you'll get to hear all about the Master in New Who, so I hope you enjoy that. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Bye!
Dynamics of a Podcast was created by Madeline Quinones, with sound design and editing by Dixie Parkinson, and music by Joshua Harvey. We do this podcast purely for the fun of the thing. Thank you for listening, and please join us next time.